Okay, today we've got the privilege of Pastor Phil Chrimes from the Door of Hope Church here in Maryborough, the Church of Christ church, and Phil's just going to tell his story when he began life in a family in Victoria, and where life's journey has taken him to now here in Maryborough. So good morning. With Loft Conversations, we've got a new person in town. Well, he's been here a year, and he's the new pastor of the Door of Hope Church, which is the Church of Christ Church in Kent Street here in Maryborough. And I just thought we'll have a conversation with Phil and find out where he's from and just about his life in general. So Phil, there's two rules we've got here. Mm-hmm. One of them is we tell the truth, and the second one is we don't tell a lie.
Yep, I get it.
Okay.
I understand what that means.
Yeah, comfortable with that?
Yep.
Good on you. All right, so
people listening may not be comfortable with that, but I'm comfortable with that.
So where were you born?
I was born in Healesville, Victoria, up in the people might know it from like where the fires were recently, King Lake.
Yep.
Up around the mountains up there.
Yep. And how long were you living there?
Not long. My father was in the public school system as a primary school teacher, so he moved around a fair bit. I think I was one or something when we moved to another town outside Geelong called Batesford. Batesford, we stayed there for 6 years or something, and then we moved into North Geelong. Yep. So I'm from Victoria.
Did Mum work?
No, Mum never worked.
So stay-at-home mum?
Stay-at-home mum. Yep. Probably in that era where that tended to be the done thing. Mm-hmm. So Mum just looked after the household, budget, cooking, cleaning, all that sort of stuff.
How many kids in the family?
So 4 of us, an older brother and an older sister and a younger sister.
Right. So you're number 3 out of 4.
Yep, number 3 out of 4, yep.
Okay. So you moved a couple of places.
Yep. And
as Dad was involved in the schooling. So how many homes? So we're from Batesford, near Geelong.
Actually, I think from Healesville, I think we went to Speed first, which is up in the Mallee in Victoria. Actually, I was good friends with Herbie Rose. I don't know whether you remember Lionel Rose, the Aboriginal boxer. Yeah. His younger brother. Right. He and I used to knock around when we were 4 or 5 years old.
Fight around?
Well,
push and shove.
Yeah, back in those days, of course, as we were talking before, there was no internet, TV or anything like that. So as soon as you wake up as a young boy, you're out in the middle of nowhere. So we used to get up to all sorts of mischief.
Yep. So then from
Speed.
Yep.
Then I think we moved from Speed to Batesford.
Yep.
Which is not far out of Geelong.
Mm-hmm. And
then from Batesford into North Geelong. And my mum still lives in that house at North Geelong.
Yeah, right. Yep. So, okay, and so through your schooling time, so you're an excelling student in early years or a struggling one or...
Okay, well, if you ask my mum...
they're normally good to ask because they're straight.
Yep, she'd be playing golf or something and she'd get a phone call and someone, because we didn't have mobiles in those days, so someone would come out from the clubhouse and say, the school's ringing about your son again. So no, because what happened was I had a form of dyslexia, and when I was because all my brothers, my brother and my sisters, we all went to Catholic schools, so like colleges, and so you're doing chemistry, advanced maths, and all that sort of stuff. Which that part was fine, but of course every sort of essay and subject you need to be able to read and write and everything like that. So, and I was a lot more physical than sitting around, so I struggled to sit in a classroom.
Yep. So
consequently, I didn't fit in too well to that sort of education. And I think it was in about Form 2, which what do they call that now, Year 8.
Yep.
Shifted to a trade training school or a trade college. Because back in those days, you had the typical college where you go heading towards university, and then you had the trade college if you're going to be a tradesman. And trade school, secondary school only went to Year 10.
Yeah. And
then you headed off and did your trade.
Yep. So in your primary school, you got the smack a few times?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah. I know that experience. So,
yeah.
So what sort of smacks were you getting in those days?
So nuns at the school?
So I went to, there were nuns.
Yep.
I remember my nun in grade 2. She was really nice.
Yep.
But then you get to, so it's a mix of nuns and, teachers.
Yep.
Some of the teachers were a bit rough.
Yep.
And, I hold out your hand, they get the ruler out, a couple of belts.
Yep.
I wrote something I shouldn't, get a belt. Scratch the desk, get a belt. Push the girl, got a belt.
So Mum wouldn't have got many games of golf without a phone call.
Oh, yeah. And of course, in those days too, you'd come home and if there was a note or something you had to give your parents.
Oh, yeah.
Philip's been in trouble again today, so you get another belt off your dad.
Yeah. Yep. All in love.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Loving Christian brothers and sisters.
Yeah. Yeah. So then off to trade school, or off to the like a tech school.
Yes. So from primary school, I shifted then to the sort of senior college.
Yep.
Chanel College, I think it was called, up in the hill, really sort of top college. Yep. And of course, that's where it went from pushing and scratching and getting cuts to actually getting into physical fights with people. And then the cuts up there were not just a ruler, they were a thick slab of rubber, about that thick, that the brother would sit on the table.
Yeah.
And then you'd hold out your hand, and if you pulled your hand out in fear, you got an extra one. So you had to be strong enough to keep your hand there while he would take a full swing at you, whack, and you'd end up with a bruise. And if you misjudged and went up your arm a little bit, they'd actually hurt extra.
Yeah. I do remember getting those occasionally myself. And
fairly common occurrence for me.
A fairly common occurrence, yeah. I mean, that was the discipline that was handed out.
Yeah.
Wasn't
it was the go-to discipline. Yeah.
We had leather straps about this thick.
Yeah.
It was, and little halfpennies in between.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could get 6 of the best, which was painful. And did we learn a lesson? Well, time tells. We did, I think.
Yeah, well, I was pretty wild, so it taught me how to stop being wild when I didn't want to get into trouble. Yeah. And I remember one particular occasion, I think this was probably about Form 3 or 4, so I'm not really sure. No, it could have even been less than that. One of my mates, who was huge for his age, I think it was only about year 7 or 8 or something. He stood like 6 foot already. He was massive. He just grew really quick. Yep. And so what would happen is the brother in the front would say, "Put your pens down, no one touch your pen." And of course I accidentally picked up a pen and just started twirling in my head because I was listening. And of course I picked up a pen. So I'm out the front. And what this one was instead of getting the cut, you actually had to lean over the desk, and he had a long piece of dowel a couple of metres long, like a broom handle. Yep. And he'd swing it like a golf club and whack you across the backside or back of the legs. Yeah. So this guy was in trouble, come up the front, and he said no. So then this old brother tried to physically force this guy to come up the front and bend over and give him a belt. So literally there was a fight happening in the front of the classroom between this kid and the brother. And in the end, the brother was grabbing his heart, and an ambulance came to take him off. He had a heart attack.
Memories of school.
Yeah.
Wow.
You wouldn't see that sort of thing nowadays.
No. I mean, certainly not these days. No. So we're off to trade school.
Yep.
And you did well there? Enjoyed that more than...
Yeah, blitz trade school, because I went from... failing at higher education and came back to trade school, and maths was easy, science was easy. And then, of course, in the workshop area, you do motor mechanics and metal work and woodwork and all that sort of stuff, which was just fun to me. It was like going to school, just making stuff and playing.
Yeah. So preferably you're better at using your hands than using your head.
Well, yes and no, because it was just the dyslexia with English that was the problem.
So the dyslexia, just explain dyslexia for us.
Well, there's lots of different forms of dyslexia. Mine in particular was spelling and remembering words, like crazy stuff that people would think, really? Are you asking how to spell that? So still, I have trouble with words like then, there, where. I've got to stop and actually try and picture it. And then sometimes I actually have to check with people if I got this right. Mm-hmm. So my brain doesn't hold words, like I can't spell words. So, of course, back then everything was handwritten.
Yeah.
And of course, you'd go through handwriting and you're
assignment.
trying to think, how do you spell this word? How do you spell that word? And of course, back in those days, you lost a mark for every
Yeah.
word spelt wrong. I'd
Yeah.
get down 20 lines and I've spelt, 20 words wrong.
Yeah,
I'm already...
yeah.
So I'd failed not because I didn't know things, but
Yeah.
failed because I couldn't spell.
Yep.
And back in those days, they didn't know much about it.
No, there's more help these days
Yeah.
for that sort of thing.
And because and we know it's dyslexia because I still have it. I still
Oh, yeah.
I still can't spell words.
Yep.
Which is why I was able to go back and do further education was when computers were invented. Because they'll pick up all the words that I can't spell.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And so now I can write essays and see which words are wrong and fix them up and hand it in and everything's okay.
Yep.
So
Yep.
prior to that, I couldn't get anything done.
Yeah, right. So finished year 10? And then...
No. I was over-schooled. School didn't like me, even though I enjoyed the trade school.
Yeah.
So I think I only finished year 8. I got about halfway through year 9 when I left.
Right.
And my uncle was a builder, so I went and worked with him. Because back in those days, it was just leave school and go to work.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
right. Mm. Mm.
So
So
I've
what
only
age
been
were you then?
15, I think.
Right.
It's pretty young, isn't it? You think of a 15
Yeah,
think of a
yeah.
15-year-old student nowadays going onto a building site working like I was. It's just a different world.
It certainly is, yeah. Although, I'm a bit of a believer in either using your head or your hands to keep it sort of simple, and some kids are geared that way and some aren't, and I think we might be doing a disservice to some kids to keep them longer at school to potentially go to uni, which, I've had discussions about university and that's for another day.
Yeah.
But I think, if you've been made to more use your hands, and that's not putting down using your head, but
Well, back then, having a trade was seen as like a good thing. You had a trade; it was like a skill. It was actually esteemed in society to become a carpenter or a boilermaker or whatever.
Yep.
But society changed, and in the last, 10, 15, 20 years, it was seen as if you can't make it to university, then I'll go and do a trade. It was seen as like a dropout option.
Yeah.
Whereas back when I grew up, it wasn't a dropout option.
No.
It was actually a serious, like you became a tradesman. That was a craft. That was a skill. That was something that people looked up to.
It's something that's needed.
Yep.
It's these things are needed, and particularly in today.
And added to that too is they saw your apprenticeship as your continued education.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's sort of like you leave school and do your apprenticeship. It's sort of almost not considered as continued education.
Yep.
In reality, it is, because you're getting like a certificate 3 or 4 in whatever it is you're doing.
Yes.
But so I still see if somebody gets an apprenticeship, that's a continuation of their education. So why make them go to year 12?
Yep.
To then leave that, do a trade, and actually do a further 3 or 4 years training as an apprentice. You might as well leave in year 10.
Yeah.
As long as you've got basic sort of literacy and numeracy skills and you've got life skills.
So you were earning money back then? Did you get a little bit of pay? How much pay did you get? Roughly what year are we talking about?
Oh, now you're testing me. So we'd be talking about 78.
Yep.
So I think I probably got $18 for the week or something like that.
Yep.
I do remember though, once I'd finished my apprenticeship, I think the first or second year out, my goal was to try and earn $25,000 for the year, and that was good money.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Back then.
So that would be 81 or something like that, 82.
So you're a youngster on about 25 grand.
Yeah.
Big money.
Back then it was.
Yeah. No,
because once I was fit, healthy, knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
Worked hard. So subcontractor.
Yeah, so self-employed.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And sort of new homes or renos, or what sort of?
I tended to stick with a builder. So back then too, the other thing was we did everything. So domestic, setting out all the way through to fixing. So, frame, hang all the doors, put the windows in, finish off.
So you learn the wide variety of
all the way through.
Fantastic. Yep. So then you're now your early 20s, earning the big bucks. At home? Living at home?
I lived at home until I got married,
Yep. So let's step back to that. When did so you're earning the money, living at home.
Yep.
It's a good place to stay because you can save a lot of money.
Yep. And Mum cooked well and washed my clothes.
Yeah,
Why would you go anywhere else? I just don't understand those kids who want to move out of home.
It's a big learning lesson.
Yeah. We had our eldest moved out of home, and I think it only took about a month or two, and he was back. Said, "Gee, I didn't realise there were so many expenses associated with that."
Oh, not just the $20 a week board that Mum and Dad.
No.
That was all profit to them. Yeah. Did you pay board?
I did. I can't remember what it was though, but it was a nominal sort of fee just to make me learn responsibility.
Yeah. Yep. Righto. So you're a subby, self-employed, and then where from there?
So I was probably 18, 19 or something when I met Kerry.
Yep.
So a mate of mine, we used to go out on the weekend, parties and pubs and different things like that. My sister was also training to be a nurse, and through her I heard that there was a nurses' party on somewhere. Yep. So back in those days, you know, there wasn't that security risk. You just rock up as a stranger to a nurses' party.
Smoking?
No, I never really took up smoking.
Yep.
The drinking was probably a bit excessive.
Yep.
Rock up at the nurses' party, just drinking, and saw Kerry across there and thought, gee, she's cute, and pity she's so young. Yep. I thought she was like 16 or something, and I was really old, like 18 or 19. And as it turned out, she was actually 3 years older than me.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so she always looked really young for her age.
Yeah.
And I remember once we went to the drive-in, and I'm 18, got my P plates on. She's 21, and they asked her for ID.
Okay. The drive-ins, that's another story.
Yeah.
Yep. Right. So then you.
So
just,
I met
move
her.
us through that.
Yeah. So I met her. Knew that she was working, because back in those days they used to live in the nursing home because they trained at the hospital. So I rang the nursing home.
Which one was that?
Geelong Hospital.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So just left a message trying to get in touch with her and stuff like that. And in the end, what happened was a couple of the other nurses saw a notice because I'd rung and left a message. So there's a notice board, Kerry ring Phillip, you know.
Yep.
And Kerry, she's just not interested that much in guys. And so they locked her in the phone booth and said, you're not coming out until you ring him. So they forced her to ring.
Good friends.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we organised a game of squash, and it sort of took off from there.
Yeah, right.
Yep, just got along well. And,
yep.
Yeah, went from one thing to the next. So I was 18. By 21, we were married.
Yep. Good. And still living around Geelong?
Yeah, so she came from East Geelong. I came from North Geelong. When we got married, we shifted into West Geelong.
Right. Yep. Did you rent or buy? Or?
We just rented a little one-bedroom apartment or unit.
Yep.
Just basic.
Okay. So then moving on from there.
Yep.
Business-wise, family-wise, what was?
Yeah, so I just kept working as a subcontract carpenter.
Didn't employ anybody?
No, I just worked with another guy. So we just worked framing and building, and Kerry worked as a nurse, so we had double income. We ended up buying some land out at Clifton Springs, which is on the Bellarine Peninsula.
Yep.
So we got I think it could have even been a quarter-acre block for $10,000.
Yeah.
You'd love to have that sort of land now, wouldn't you?
Add a couple of noughts to it.
Yeah. And then we talked to Grandma and Grandpa, and they gave us another 10 grand to buy the block next door. So we had like a double block.
Oh, yeah.
And I was building for a guy in the area, so he helped me out with material. So he got the building permit and bought material through his business, and I built the house myself. So we were in our own home before we had our first child.
Yep.
And all we owed on it was the cost of the land, which was 10 grand or something.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good start.
Yeah. But there's things that we did that you just can't do nowadays. Yeah. Like we moved in when there was no carpet and only one bathroom, and there was no sewage connected, so we had an outside toilet. So Kerry, after our first child, had to walk the plank sort of out of the back deck down, And it was one of those toilets where the guy would come and collect the can.
A night car.
Yeah. So of course in summer you go out, you can hear all the blowflies. You've got to lift the lid
and down that way there's lots of flies.
Yeah.
In summer.
So, yeah. We didn't mind it. That was the life back then. You just sort of lived. It was so different than what it is nowadays.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. So then continued on. So how many kids? Or
we had 3 kids. First one Adam, then Ben, then Katie.
Yep.
So 2 boys, and our youngest is a girl. So pretty much in succession,
a couple of years in between.
Yep. So I was 22 when I had my first child.
Mm-hmm.
Like you talk to a lot of 22-year-olds nowadays and say, how would you like to have a kid? And then by 23, 24, 2, and then 26, 3 of them.
Yeah.
So it was really good though, because Kerry was a nurse, so she knew a lot of the stuff about how to look after children and whatever.
Yep.
So I was more like build the house, work the garden, discipline the kids, go get the groceries. And she did a lot of the maternal stuff being a nurse.
Yep. So then how long were you in Clifton Springs for?
We were in Clifton Springs up until I felt called into ministry. So what would that have been? About 93 or something. So we were probably there for about 8 years.
So were you a church goer before that?
So going back a little bit, my father trained to be a priest for 3 years.
Oh, yeah, in the Catholic
system. And so I come from a long line of Catholic families in Geelong. And we were well known in Geelong.
Yep.
So when Kerry's mum found out that I was from the Cotters, she nearly had a fit because the Cotters were the ones down at the pub who used to get in fights all the time. So we have a bit of heritage. I think what it was there's stuff in our background that caused them not to really fit into society too well.
Right.
So a lot of drinking. I've got a lot of alcoholics in my family and stuff like that.
Yep.
So I had a bit of a fiery temper, but not as bad as some of the others.
Yep.
Hence the fighting at school and everything like that. So Kerry kept saying to her mum, he's nice though. So Dad trained in the priesthood, and
so was she a Catholic too?
No, she came. Her mum was Baptist. Her father's an atheist.
Oh yeah.
So Catholic. Dad trained in the priesthood. I found out that he left the training because of the celibacy problem.
Yeah.
I think he was attracted to women, and it would be a problem, so he left. Thankfully, and Mum and him got married and had us kids. Yep. So it was just you went to church on Sunday. There was no question about it. You weren't allowed to stay home. They made you go to church.
Yep.
The one time I talked them into letting me stay home, they came back and found me as like a 7-year-old or something out in the woodshed splitting wood with an axe. So Mum went off a tree and said he's never staying home again. You just accepted it. You stopped fighting.
Part of the rules of the household.
That's right. Yeah, you gave up in the end and just did it.
Yep.
Having said that, I actually found not so much what the priest said or the whole mass process, but especially when they read the Bible.
Yep.
The story of Jesus. So I knew about Jesus. I knew about him dying on the cross and all that sort of stuff. So I had enough input from the Catholic Church for God to work with. So I always then believed in God.
Yep.
When I was younger, I saw the story of Jesus dying on the cross at Easter, and that's when I sort of committed my life to the Lord. So I was probably 8 or something. Like I'm still in Catholic. No one's teaching me.
Yep.
But I saw it, and it was just instinctive or natural. Now looking back, I know it was the Holy Spirit just prompting me to go, Jesus died on the cross, and especially where he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I took that as Jesus died for my sins, and so, Lord, I give you my life. So I gave my life to the Lord probably when I was about 8.
Right.
Then I asked, because I think I was genuinely born again at that stage, without knowing what born again even meant, and asked my parents to give me a Bible. So here's a Catholic kid asking Mum and Dad for a Bible, where Mum and Dad don't read the Bible because they believe the priest needs to interpret the Bible, but they got me one. And so I remember every night reading my Bible. So I've studied and read the Bible since I was about 8.
Yep.
So when
back in those days, I know through the history of it, Catholics were not encouraged to read the Bible.
No.
So it's to listen to the priest who reads the Bible, and then they have the set many set prayers and things like that. But so the Bible was really only introduced to the Catholic people in 1956. I mean, it was a bit of an eye opener for me. So it was Latin even before then. I think I still remember a couple of words in Latin.
Yeah.
So it was sort of in like code.
Yep.
And the normal lay people couldn't understand it. But
so the masses were said in English by the time I came along, but my parents definitely remember you would go to mass and listen to the Latin mass.
Yeah.
I think it probably created a sense for them of almost like mystic or mysticism, like here's this strange language by this guy in a robe, and it had a sort of spiritual, mystic sort of feel about it, which I think attracted a lot of people to, there's the Pope, there's the bishops, there's the priests, they're the ones who have got the edge on God, and they're talking in a language we don't understand.
Yeah.
So it was all about being subservient to their control.
Yes. Yeah.
But the people like Mum and Dad, they believed in God and believed in Jesus. That's like, there are a lot of genuine people in Catholic Church.
So then the kids have come along. You're going well in business?
Yeah, just flat out. Like doing a trade, you've always got work.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Always.
Yep. So then where from... So as the kids started going to a local school there?
No, let's just drop back a little bit. When Adam came along, of course, I'm Catholic and Kerry's Baptist.
Yep.
And so I'm wanting to take Adam off to be baptised as a Catholic baby.
Yep.
And Kerry's saying, well, no, because there's no such thing as baptising babies. So we went off and talked to a priest. We went off and talked to the local Baptist minister. And because I had read the Bible a lot by that stage, I realised the Catholic priest was just waffling on about something else.
Yeah.
And the Baptist guy actually showed me in Scripture, or showed me in the Bible, where it's about you've got to be a believing adult to be sort of baptised. So then we just dedicated our kids in the Baptist church, and I started attending the Baptist church.
Oh, yeah. So up until then, did you continue to go to the Catholic church, or when you got married? Or?
When we first got married, probably not really, because it becomes a bit irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I believed in God and read my Bible. I got more out of that than going to Mass.
Yep.
Which to the disgust of our parents, of course.
Yeah. Fully understand that.
Yeah. So then we started attending the Baptist church, and that's where I started actually learning about things, learning about salvation and being saved and different doctrines and things.
Yep.
Which came fairly quickly because I knew the Bible.
That foundation.
Yep.
And you've got an ability to take those things in quite quickly.
Yeah. Because of my dyslexia, I can't learn very well reading, and I can't express myself well writing. I can now because of the computer, but back then, so I developed a really good memory because I had to memorize everything. I couldn't instinctively spell and stuff, and I couldn't read books, so I had to listen to what was said. So I can still remember conversations like 20 years ago.
Gee. The filing cabinet in my head's shocked, so I think. Right, so then advancing on, so you're attending the Baptist, the kids are growing up.
Yep.
Still living in Clifton Springs?
Still living in Clifton Springs, attended the Baptist church down there. And of course then hearing the teaching about Adam, our eldest son, being dedicated and not baptised, I realised, well, I'm a believing adult and I've never been baptised. So instead of me baptising Adam into the Catholic Church as a baby, I got baptised as a believing adult because I believed. I just no one had ever taught me before. So I got baptised in the local swimming pool down at Clifton Springs, and the church was a church plant, a Baptist church, met in the local community centre. So we attended there, and that church grew and grew, and we bought land and built a church and went from half a dozen people to 200 over about 6 or 7 years.
Good to be part of a growing church.
And the kids are growing up.
And so the kids went to school there? Started to?
Well, by then we'd realised that we need to send our kids to a Christian school because a lot of the secular thinking that was coming into state schools. And we believed that it was better for a child to have consistency of worldview, that we wanted the teachers to be saying much the same thing we were. That doesn't mean I was isolating them, because I'm a strong believer in exposing people. Like our kids would watch things, read things, hear things, but we would sit down and explain to them from a Christian perspective, what was right or wrong and
Yep.
what was true and false and all that sort of stuff. So our kids are quite intelligent as well, and that they were able to reason all that through.
Yep.
So we sent them to private Christian schools, and all of them did really well.
Yeah, good. Yep. Still in Clifton Springs, so you're doing subbing and then involved quite heavily in the church.
Yeah. So working in the church, I think at that particular church I ended up on the leadership team, diaconate, I think they called it back then for the Baptist church. Then a few things happened in church that caused me to be called into ministry. So because of that, we then shifted to Melbourne to go to Bible college and stuff, and the kids then continued in a Christian school up there.
Yep. So you did Bible college full time, part time, or
Yeah, I left. I'm jumping a little bit.
No.
So I stopped contracting carpentry, and I actually got a job in the CFA as a full-time firefighter.
Yep.
I think I was about 24 or something. I'm not really sure how old. Because I'd been a volunteer in the CFA, and
that's the fire authority there.
Yeah, Country Fire Authority down in Victoria. And so I got a job as a full-time firefighter, which was really good pay, really good conditions.
Yep.
While I was in the fire brigade, that's when things started to happen at church and sort of around me that sort of indicated that I was being called to ministry. So I left that job, resigned from it, and went into full-time Bible study at the college. Yep.
Mm.
So we went from both of us being paid
Yep.
to, I think it was called study allowance or something back then,
Oh yeah,
which is like
$150 a week or
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So enough to pay the rent and then scrounge some food from somewhere.
Yep. Did you sell up down at Clifton Springs?
Not initially. We rented.
Yep.
But eventually, because we realised we were going to be staying in Melbourne, we then sold later on down the track. Yep.
Righto. So then you're in Melbourne doing the theological study.
Yep.
How long? 3 years or
Yeah, it was a 3-year course. Yeah.
full time?
Full time. Yeah.
Yep. And did Kerry do that too?
No, not at that stage because our kids were still a bit younger.
Yeah.
I think Ben went to kinder while we were there.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, she was still at stay-at-home mum,
Yep.
dropping the kids off at school, going to kinder, all that sort of stuff.
Yep. Right. So after you do your theological, then what?
Before I finished my training, there was a church in Pakenham down there, the Pakenham Assemblies of God. So when I was in my 3rd year of study, I took on pastoring that church. It was a church plant from another guy who planted a church. He was leaving. It wasn't a big successful church, so there were no real qualified pastors interested because only half a dozen families and they couldn't pay anything and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I took on pastoring that church and finished off my study at the same time. And then I pastored that church for about 5 or 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that was full-time pastoring there in Pakenham after. So you moved down to Pakenham?
Moved down to Pakenham then. Yeah.
Yep.
So the study was in Dandenong, so we lived in Noble Park and Endeavour Hills and stuff. And then
on the east side.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then we moved out to Pakenham once I'd finished the study and pastored the church. Yeah.
Yep.
And did fairly well. We went from those half a dozen families to over 200 people in about 5 years.
Yeah, good steady growth.
Yeah, good steady growth. But the problem was I didn't have the experience and maturity, so I took a lot of work on myself and didn't structure things that well. So I ended up having a burnout, like an emotional breakdown.
Yeah.
So I had to resign. I didn't work for a couple of years, and that's when we bought some land up in the Dandenong Ranges, and I just hid up in the hills for a few years and built a house.
Yeah, righto. Yep. So time away.
Yeah, time away up in the hills to recover.
There's so many pastors of churches did get burnt out.
Yeah. Well, the growth, there's a lot of material. Even still, I see some pastors doing this today, and I'm a bit wiser now. But the church growth material sort of has, set up a youth group, set up this group, do this. So there's a pattern that you can just basically download off the internet and follow these steps.
Yeah.
And you will grow a church in the sense of growing attendance at the congregation.
Yeah.
But you won't necessarily grow true disciples, and a lot of those people then become very dependent upon you and need you because they're not actually converted. They're just joining a religious
community group,
a nice group of people, great place to be. You know, they've got stuff for the kids and relation, but because they're not truly born again and surrender their life to Christ, they're there for what they can get out of it. What I'd call nowadays consumer Christians. They're not actually serving the Lord, they're looking to be served.
Yeah.
So as a pastor, you fall into the trap of just getting used. And I think added to that is the God of this world, Satan, then just sees that weakness, and all he does is send more and more people to you. With all sorts of needs until you're swamped. And you're not actually doing any ministry. All you're doing is running around in circles.
Just plugging the holes. No, that's certainly not the format that I understand, and that'll be for another discussion, hopefully, with you. So you had a couple of years up in the Dandenongs building a house. Sort of the hermit in the hills. And recovering your health. So physical health as well as your mental health and spiritual health. So did you fellowship in a church there?
No, we nowhere in Pakenham could I do that because everybody knew who I was. Fairly small town, only population of 10 or 15,000 or something. So we tried a few things, but no, in the end we actually stopped going to church for a while. I'm not sure how long, 2-3 years, whatever. And then when we started to feel recovered enough to go back to church, we went and joined a church at Cockatoo. Some people may know Cockatoo up in the Dandenongs. That's where the Ash Wednesday fires went through. So we went there, and that was an Anglican church, but it was what you'd call a charismatic Anglican church.
Oh, yeah.
The day that we arrived, they had shut the church down, and they just reopened it. A couple of families were just determined not to close it. So these two families said, let's open the doors, because they had a building and everything. At one point, the church must have grown, but something happened. It fell apart. And so these couple of families opened up the door, and that's the day that we walked in. And so we were instrumental, having obviously the training and everything, to work with them to get that church up and going.
That's good.
So once again, that church grew from, those 3 or 4 families to enough to be able to hire a pastor for 3 days. So I'm not sure what we got to, probably 70, 80 people.
About what year was that?
So we would be talking now, I finished my Bible training in 95, and I was there, so that'd be about 2003, roughly. To 2005 or 6, something like that. And then once they got the pastor in, the pastor literally said, I don't know what to do with you, because, I was sort of like pseudo-pastor. I was the go-to person for what should we do here and there and all that, so I had a lot of influence. And of course, the new pastor was young and he didn't know how to handle that. So we recognised that. And so we just left the church and left him to it. And graciously, there was nothing wrong with that. He needed to do what he needed to do. And then because that was the closest church we could find, any other, because I couldn't go back to Pakenham because everybody knew me. That was fairly close, Cockatoo. So to drive any further, we're talking about like a 50-minute drive or even an hour to find another church. And in the end, we decided our life got busy. I started working a lot more, and Kerry was working, and so we stopped going to church for about 5 or 6 years.
And the kids went to school up in the hills?
No, they went to school. Some of them went to school for a short while down in Pakenham, but there was another school up in Druin near Warrigal. So we'd drive them down to Pakenham, they'd catch the bus up to Warrigal, because it was a really good school up there, high education Christian school. Because all our kids were really smart, and that they needed that sort of level of education because they went on to do stuff at uni. So I still remember the day we finished taking kids to school and all that was over. Gee, that felt like a relief.
So you were driving them to Warrigal?
No, we were driving them down to Pakenham from up in near Gembrook. Down the hill, down into Pakenham.
It's a half-hour drive?
Yeah, probably,
Every day, down, back, and they hop on a bus. So they're on the bus for probably...
so that takes them probably about an hour and a half to get to school, an hour and a half to get home.
And the Victorians, they don't get a lot of sun at the best of times,
Yeah.
especially up in the hills.
Yeah.
Oh, well, no wonder. Yep.
No, and that was a high education sort of school. They had work
Wow.
to do. They studied.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
plenty
and-
of time to do it on the bus.
Yeah, and we never made our kids study.
They just
we
did
just,
it.
We just said, if you don't want to study, just fail. Then
Yep.
come with me. So I took them out working a few times, carried a bit of concrete here and there, and they all said, I think I'll study.
That's it. That's it. Righto. So, so the kids. So I'm just getting the kids are coming through the higher end of school,
Yep.
or the secondary side.
Yep.
And then you're still using the hammer up in the hills.
No, actually, no. Because I was getting my back. I had trouble with my back by this stage. So I actually then started teaching at TAFE. So I did that certificate course where you can do adult training. So I did a bit of casual teaching at TAFE, and that turned into, I thought I'd like to go and actually teach trade training skills to secondary school students rather than apprentices.
Yep.
So because I had a couple of degrees by now, like a degree in biblical studies, a degree in Christian counselling, I was able to then just add to that some postgraduate studies in secondary education to become qualified as a teacher.
Right.
So I became qualified as a secondary school teacher and started teaching building construction in secondary school.
Yep.
Yep.
Which
I enjoyed.
So did Kerry work then when the kids were going to school?
Yeah, so Kerry went back to nursing. She got a job as a district nurse, so out of the ward and everything like that, which she really liked. And she liked that. You just head off in your car and visit people and help them out and stuff.
Yep.
But because of all her training and learning that she did in terms of being a pastor's wife, because when she did that, we were finished at the church, she ended up being the unit manager of district nursing down there. So I'm on the highest level pay as a school teacher, and she's on the high level pay as a unit manager. So we're on really good money at that stage.
Yep.
Which is also a part of a trap. That's why we're working so much. The money gets a bit addictive, and you work for all this money. So we did that for about 5 or 6 years.
Yep. Still living in Cockatoo.
Gembrook, near Cockatoo.
Sorry, Gembrook. Yep. Righto.
So I'm working as a teacher.
Yep.
Kerry's
She's working. So you're on the big bucks.
Yep.
Both of you. Income's the dollars.
Yep.
So, and fellowshipping in any church at that stage?
No,
or?
still not fellowship.
Just
That's
yourselves.
those last sort of 5 or 6 years. Yeah. So I've always read and studied the Bible.
Yep.
And of course, the internet's come out now. So,
Yep.
watching a lot of preaching and teaching online
Yep.
and stuff like that. So because I was teaching at a Christian trade training centre, we used to have fellowship. I used to have fellowship with the other teachers. Like every morning we'd have devotion and stuff. So I saw that fellowship as enough because it was still problematic for me to go to church anywhere. Like, we were sort of well known.
Yep.
I remember because I had to break down and left the church.
Yep.
And of course the rumours run rife.
Yeah.
And Kerry was looking after as a district nurse, and she came and looked after somebody, and I don't know how the conversation came up. You'd have to ask my wife about this, but there's a lady started to talk about, have you heard? She must have said, I'll go to church. Which church? The AOG.
Yeah.
She said, you should have heard what the previous pastor did. And of course she's talking to my wife. Yeah. And, he stole all this money from the church, and he built a mansion up in the hills. And Kerry just let it go on. And then she said, well, actually, I'm that pastor's wife, and I can tell you that is not true.
Yep.
And she was really embarrassed. And when Kerry explained to her what went on, she regretted that she got sucked into all the gossip and talk and stuff.
Fake news,
Yeah.
we call it today.
Yeah.
Well,
People love it, don't
the
they?
lies from the pit, somehow they gather momentum on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, what people didn't know is we had a lot of money to begin with, because remember back in Clifton Springs we owned our house by the time we were 25 or
going
something.
well.
So, and then we're on good money up in the hills, like more than what people could probably imagine in the church.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we're building basically a mansion on a 5-acre block or something. Where did all that money come from? He must have stole that money from church.
That's it. No, that was a blessing to you. So then, you've done that. You're both on the big bucks, building the mansion.
Yep.
Kids are going off to uni.
Yeah, starting to get into uni. Our eldest, Adam, went and did electrical engineering. Ben did civil engineering. And I think Katie did psychology, social work.
Yep. And so you moved from there?
Yeah, so when we moved from there, we actually moved up here. So by the time we moved, because we...
Roughly what year was that?
So what are we in now? 21. So I've only been up here about 3 years. So what would that be? 2018, 19, something like that?
Yep.
So by the time we...
That's a big move to all of a sudden you're out of Victoria.
Yep.
And here we go north.
Yeah, so our eldest son, Adam, had moved out. He's done really well. He's actually a professor and part of a research team, and like he's right up there now.
Yep.
So he's off. He's still in Melbourne, doing really well.
Yep.
Ben ended up getting chronic fatigue, so he is still with us. So he had to drop out of his course and can't work and stuff.
Yep.
And then Katie ended up getting married.
Yep.
So once Katie sort of got married, they lived with us for a while. So what triggered it all was Kerry's parents, about 20 years prior to us moving, 25 years prior to us moving, they came up to Bribie Island. So we used to visit up here every second year.
Oh, yeah.
And we always talked about, where we would retire, better
Yep.
weather and all that sort of stuff. And because we lived up in the Dandenong Ranges and we were getting older, we thought we have had enough of this wet, cold weather. So Katie and Daniel both lost their jobs and they were starting to look for work. And we said to them, why don't you look for work in Queensland, up in Brisbane?
Yep.
And then if you get work, we'll shift up there. So that's exactly what happened. He got a really good job up here, part of a multinational company. So we previously had bought a rental property up here, so we moved him into a rental property. Then I resigned from work, Kerry resigned from work, we sold the house, gathered all our money together and shifted up here.
Yeah, right.
So I think we made something like 10 or 15 trips back and forward, getting Ben and up here, and then getting Katie and Daniel up here, and then getting us up here. And, which I didn't mind. Over probably a couple of years.
Yeah.
So we moved out of the house, lived in the caravan down in Pakenham, and then we travelled sort of up here, dropping kids off, and then we'd go back to Pakenham and live in the van for a bit. And so we just... But it felt good to not be working anymore. It was sort of like I was retired, really, because I wasn't doing anything.
Yeah.
So I had plans when I came up here to go back into school teaching. But at that stage already, I'd felt the Lord calling me to go back into ministry. So I'd already said that to the Rick, a good friend of mine, who was the principal of the school I was at. I said, I feel like being called back into ministry, which sort of prompted...
This is a school in Brisbane?
No, this is a school back in Melbourne.
Yep.
And so it all sort of came together. The kids losing their job, getting a job in Brisbane, me starting to feel like I'm called back into ministry. So it was just this big change. Yep. And so we came up, and of course you've got to put food on the table. So I went looking for teaching jobs and casual teaching and all that sort of stuff, and just went from one disaster to another until God said, how many more of these do you have to do before you actually do what I'm telling you to do?
Yeah.
So eventually I got the hint.
Yep.
I remember one fill-in teaching job. I don't know what they call it up here. Emergency teaching or whatever it is.
I call it expensive babysitting.
Pretty much.
Yep.
So I had a year 7 class, last 2 periods on a Friday. And I had kids jumping out the window, another kid beating another kid up, some girl crying, screaming and carrying on because she's been teased. And in the end, I had to send someone down to the principal to send some help. It was just chaos.
Bring back the old upbringing from your Catholic schools.
Yeah, bring out the belt.
Put one head out the window and whack them on the backside.
Because you can't do anything, and I'm a fill-in teacher, so I've got no... They know that I've got no
relationship with them.
No relationship, no power to do anything. I don't assess any of the work. I don't talk to their parents.
Yeah.
It's such a crazy system. But in the end, I said, I can't do this anymore. That's too stressful. So I went and got some full-time teaching, but that was not much better. Like, it was better in the sense that I could do that, but it was still that something's not right. I shouldn't be here.
Yep. Right. So then, and Kerry was working then?
No, when we came up here, she retired because she was eligible to get her superannuation by then. So we took her super and came up here, and she's technically retired.
Yep. So then, where from there? So then, this is 2018, 19. You're in
So
Brisbane.
Well, no, Bribie Island. We came up in Morayfield, Bribie Island, Burpengary. We moved around a little bit. So close to Kerry's parents and doing a few different jobs. So like I ended up teaching 1 year at the Bribie Island High School. Did really well there with the kids, but I didn't do so well with the teachers because they're so fixed on their rules, and I'm not a rule-following sort of person. So I think I clashed as much with the teacher as the kids did, which is probably why the kids like me. So that wasn't working either. So for several years, and that's when as I was praying things through, going back to ministry, I said, well, Lord, I'm qualified, experienced, I could do that. But and it was sort of like he said to me, well, there's churches out there looking for a pastor, and you're a pastor looking for a church. Yep. All we need to do is find each other, and well, where do people do that? They do that online. So I found a Christian Jobs Australia site or something. Yep. So I started applying all over Australia. So Kalgoorlie, out in the middle of nowhere, all sorts of places, because I was now committed to
going that way.
We serve the Lord.
Yes.
Go wherever. And of course, Kerry's praying, please, Lord, not Kalgoorlie, please, which didn't happen. So just trusting the Lord in that process, just put applications out. And, I was interviewed for a couple of churches down in Sydney. I'm glad I didn't end up in Sydney because that was prior to COVID. And also, I'm not a Sydney person. Like, I'm not yuppie type. I'd probably have to wear a suit to preach and all that sort of stuff, which I could make myself do, but it wouldn't be me. And the Door of Hope, I nearly didn't apply for the position at the Door of Hope.
Why is that?
When I read some of their material, they had progressive Christianity stuff in there.
Yep.
And a lot of churches are going that way, which I think is really not Christian at all.
Yep.
But I just sort of felt...
So just quickly, what is progressive Christianity?
So progressive Christianity is the idea that traditional Christianity is too restrictive and limited, and that God is revealing himself more than the Bible. So, you can progress beyond what's in Scripture. So they don't restrict themselves to the Bible. They use the Bible, but they'll also look at, say, a Buddhist monk or, a Hindu teaching or a new... So they'll open themselves up to anything because it's the idea that God is greater than the restricting him to the traditional Christian view.
Yep.
So they can take on psychology and lots of different things start to come into the church because they're not restricting themselves to what we would consider to be traditional Christianity or biblically bound Christianity. So progressive Christianity. And I thought, look, they probably just don't realise it's in there because, I'm theologically trained and I can see it.
Yep.
And I thought, I'll give it a try. I'll find out, if it goes anywhere, I'll be able to ask them about it. And so once I was interviewed and that, I realised they had no idea.
Yeah.
These are just a bunch of faithful people, and it was more likely previous pastors that had brought that sort of teaching in without the congregation realising what they were doing. So I could see that the congregation wasn't progressive. Some people in it might have been, but and it all came together. I was interviewed. I really liked the town. I love the way you've got all the old buildings in town, and I know I'm probably feel more comfortable witnessing to, relating to, ministering to people who are probably on the lower socio-economic sort of scale because of my background in getting kicked out of school and trade and everything like that. I relate better to that sort of environment. If I had to relate to professionals, I'd find that a bit difficult. And the town seemed to be like that, and the people seemed to be a bit quirky, which I like.
It's a quirky town.
So I fit in. One quirky person.
So do I.
One quirky person to another. So all that came together. I was interviewed, and I felt confident that it was the right place. And then some of the elders had, and in particular one that stood out to me, one of the elders had a vision prior to my application or seeing a picture of me or anything, had a vision or a word from the Lord that your pastor will have white hair. I think she had a vision. So she goes, oh, Lord, we don't want some old guy. My hair started going grey when I was about 28. So I had white hair by the time I was 45 or something. So that all came together.
So that's it. So you're here. So you're here in Maryborough. And settling into the town. You've been here nearly a year.
About 18 months now, I think we're coming up to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I lost 6 months of my time in around staff. Won't go into that today. The right, and so what are you doing there at the Door of Hope Church of Christ?
Turning everything upside down.
Okay. And
doing my best.
So is there anyone left in the congregation there? Or?
About half.
Yeah. Right.
No, probably 2/3.
Yeah. Yep.
So when we first came, of course, everybody's checking out the new pastor. I think our numbers, not that I'm a numbers person, I don't really care, but you know, you're asking how many people left. So I think we're averaging around 120 roughly on a weekend. But then COVID hit, so it's hard to know whether it was me or COVID, because a lot of churches struggled with people who were probably just in the habit of going to church, and then they couldn't go to church because of COVID, and realised, hey, we've got our weekend back, we can go to the beach and whatever. So there was a lot of people who probably didn't come back because of COVID. But then, of course, I started preaching quite solidly from the Bible about biblical truth, and anyone that was there for other reasons. Like some people come to church because they want to become better people. They come to church because it's a nice, loving Christian community. And all of a sudden I'm preaching about, you know, the need to repent and get saved and all that sort of stuff. And they're just choking on it. So we had our numbers then dropped. I think we're averaging about 75 roughly a weekend at the moment. So we've lost 30, 40, 50 people. But we've stabilised now. And I think we're going up from there.
And you've started outreaching in town at Town Hall Green.
Town Hall Green, yep.
So how's that going?
Well, we've only set up once on a Saturday afternoon because we've just bought some gear for it and everything like that. So we're going to have another go this Saturday. I've been working on a group of people for evangelism in the town. So I think they're ready, you know, because one of the things was coming to the church, because there was a lot of progressive Christianity. It took me like 12 months to teach what the gospel actually was. And then probably the last 6 months working on helping that particular group of people how to do evangelism. So we're ready to start doing evangelism as a more organised thing.
Right.
So we're planning to be on the church green with a setup where we do a bit of preaching. We have a microphone sort of out 10 metres or something where people can come up and ask questions or debate us, and which I really like, because a lot of people who think about these things think about, well, does God exist? Is there life after death? Where, you know, people have questions, and they're not going to come into church because church, that's really intimidating. I was just going for a walk this morning, walking past the church, and I thought, you know, if you were wandering but you're not a Christian, you're not really going to walk into church and go, hey, what, you know, put your hand up and ask a question.
No.
So I want to take my knowledge of the Bible out into public and give people the opportunity to ask the questions they've not been able to ask in an environment where I'm not putting any pressure on you. I'll just explain to you how I see things, which is probably obviously going to be different than how most people see things. But that's Chifley Place, where it says down the bottom, freedom of expression.
It's fantastic.
So the idea is you express yourself, I'll express myself, we'll debate as to what's true and what's real, and I'm quite comfortable with that.
Well, look forward to that showing fruit. I mean,
see what happens.
It's very fortunate Maryborough does have that, in that particular part, right in the heart of town. So freedom of expression is so important in today's. You know, I'm a big fan for democracy for Queensland. And it's all part of it. And you see the systems of the world trying to shut people up, and the systems of government are caving in. Anyone can see it. And so there is an increasing awareness in people saying, what is life about? You know, they can see their trust in government, their trust in the systems of the world. There's some weirdo stuff coming. And no, it's great to hear. Well, welcome to the town. I've really enjoyed this morning, and I'm sure we'll have further conversations in the future.
There's a lot more to go in that.
That's good. Good on you. Thanks for coming, Phil.
Bless you. Thank you.